By the time Gregg Allman walked into Fame Studios for the last time, he already knew the clock was running out. The cancer had returned. Doctors had delivered a devastating prognosis, telling him he likely had only 12 to 18 months left to live. Most people facing such news would have announced it publicly, sought sympathy, or stepped away from the spotlight. Gregg Allman chose a different path. He told almost no one outside his closest circle. He refused to let the illness define his remaining years, and he continued making music until his body could no longer keep up. Yet cancer was not the greatest secret he carried. For more than half a century, Gregg lived with wounds that went far deeper than any diagnosis. Long before fame, before sold-out arenas, before the Allman Brothers Band became one of the most influential groups in American music, he carried the pain of childhood loss, loneliness, addiction, guilt, and grief. Those experiences shaped every note he sang and every song he wrote. His final album would become his farewell. But to understand why it mattered so much, you have to go back to the beginning. Gregory Lenore Allman was born on December 8, 1947, in Nashville, Tennessee. His life changed forever before he was old enough to remember it. On December 26, 1949, his father, Willis Turner Allman, was murdered during a robbery. After picking up a hitchhiker, Willis was shot and killed over just $15. The crime shattered the family instantly. Gregg was not yet 2 years old, and his older brother Dwayne was only 3. Their mother, Geraldine, suddenly found herself raising 2 boys alone with almost no financial security. Determined to keep her family together, she worked tirelessly, taking accounting jobs wherever she could find them. The family eventually relocated to Daytona Beach, Florida, hoping for a fresh start. For Geraldine, survival became the priority. For Gregg, however, childhood often felt like abandonment. Years later, he admitted that as a young boy he sometimes believed his mother did not love him. He could not understand why she was always working or why life seemed so difficult. Only as an adult did he realize the sacrifices she had made to keep her children out of orphanages and provide them with opportunities. One of those opportunities became one of the most painful experiences of his youth. In the early 1950s, Geraldine enrolled Gregg and Dwayne in Castle Heights Military Academy in Tennessee. The school emphasized strict discipline, rigid rules, and constant structure. For young boys already struggling with the absence of their father, the environment felt harsh and unforgiving. Dwayne responded by becoming rebellious and protective. He often stood up for his younger brother when other students or instructors pushed too hard. Gregg reacted differently. He withdrew into himself. The pressure weighed heavily on him. He struggled academically, suffered from depression, and endured punishments for poor performance. School became a place of anxiety rather than growth. Even simple failures felt devastating. At one point, poor grades led to humiliating disciplinary measures that left lasting emotional scars. Despite the hardships, Gregg continued trying. He immersed himself in studying and even considered becoming a dentist one day if music did not work out. But the military academy experience hardened him. It taught him endurance, yet it also deepened his sense of isolation. After several difficult years, their mother finally withdrew both boys from the school because she could no longer afford the tuition. Returning to Daytona Beach marked the beginning of a new chapter. The family still struggled financially, but Gregg discovered something that gave him purpose. Music. The transformation began with a simple purchase. In the summer of 1957, after saving money from a paper route, Gregg bought a used Sears Silvertone guitar from a pawn shop. It cost $39 and featured a red sunburst finish. To most people it was just a cheap instrument. To Gregg and Dwayne, it became everything. The brothers fought constantly over who would get to play it. Arguments erupted almost daily. At times they physically wrestled over the guitar. One dispute even resulted in broken strings, forcing them to replace them with fishing line because they could not afford proper replacements. Yet those battles reflected passion rather than hostility. Music had become their shared obsession. Dwayne gravitated toward lead guitar while Gregg focused on rhythm, chords, and eventually keyboards. Together they spent countless hours teaching themselves songs and techniques. The guitar was more than an instrument. It was an escape route from the difficulties surrounding them. At night, another influence entered Gregg's life. Under the covers, with a transistor radio hidden nearby, he listened to WLAC in Nashville. The station's powerful signal carried rhythm and blues music hundreds of miles across the South. What he heard changed him forever. Artists such as Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, Jimmy Reed, and Bobby Blue Bland introduced him to a world of emotion unlike anything he had experienced before. The music felt raw, honest, and deeply human. Gregg became obsessed. He filled notebooks with song titles and lyrics. He studied recordings repeatedly, memorizing melodies and structures. By his early teens, he had taught himself dozens of songs. The music did not merely entertain him. It shaped his identity. Around the same period, another important figure entered his life, Floyd Miles. Miles was a young blues musician from Daytona Beach who led a band called the House Rockers. More importantly, he became a mentor. Floyd taught Gregg how to sing with feeling rather than technique alone. He showed him how to use his diaphragm, project emotion, and connect with audiences. He demonstrated that great music was not about perfection, it was about truth. Gregg absorbed every lesson. Years later, he would credit Floyd Miles with helping him discover the distinctive vocal style that became his signature. By high school, music had completely taken over his life. Gregg and Dwayne formed local bands and began performing around Daytona Beach. One early group, the Shufflers, played rhythm and blues covers in clubs and small venues. Gregg was only 16 years old, but audiences immediately noticed him. His voice possessed a maturity and emotional depth unusual for someone so young. Combined with Dwayne's rapidly developing guitar skills, the brothers created a powerful musical partnership. The local performances multiplied. Soon they were playing dozens of shows every year, earning modest amounts of money while building a reputation throughout the region. What began as a hobby became a mission. As the years passed, the brothers adopted various band names, eventually settling on the Allman Joys. They traveled relentlessly throughout the South, performing in bars, clubs, armories, and anywhere willing to hire them. Life on the road was difficult. Money remained scarce. They often spent their earnings on instruments, amplifiers, and records rather than food or comfortable accommodations. Sometimes they slept in vehicles. Other times they stayed wherever friends or promoters could find space. Yet they never considered quitting. Every performance represented another opportunity to improve. Gregg became so committed to music that traditional education no longer seemed relevant. He missed large portions of school because of performances and eventually skipped his own graduation ceremony to play a paying gig. To many adults, the decision appeared irresponsible. To Gregg, it felt inevitable. The stage was where he belonged. By 1966, the brothers had accumulated enough money from performances to enter a recording studio. They invested nearly everything they had into the sessions, recording original songs and pressing a small number of records to sell at shows. The project was risky. Failure would have left them nearly broke. But it demonstrated the determination that defined their early careers. Eventually, opportunity arrived in the form of a record deal. In 1967, the brothers moved to Los Angeles and signed with Liberty Records as members of a band called Hourglass. On paper, it appeared to be the breakthrough they had been chasing. Reality proved disappointing. Record executives wanted polished pop music rather than the blues-based sound the brothers loved. Producers controlled creative decisions. Commercial considerations replaced artistic freedom. The experience frustrated both Gregg and Dwayne. The resulting albums sold poorly, and tensions grew steadily worse. Gregg later described the period as emotionally exhausting. Instead of expressing himself authentically, he found himself rewriting songs to fit industry expectations. For musicians who had spent years developing their own voice, the situation felt suffocating. Eventually, the partnership collapsed. Dwayne returned south, determined to pursue a different path. Ironically, the failure of Hourglass became the foundation for something much greater. In 1969, Gregg and Dwayne reunited with a group of talented musicians in Macon, Georgia. Together they formed what would become the Allman Brothers Band. The group stood out immediately. Musically, they blended blues, jazz, country, rock, and improvisation into something unique. Socially, they represented an integrated lineup during a period when segregation still shaped much of Southern life. The band members lived together, rehearsed endlessly, and devoted themselves entirely to developing a distinctive sound. Those early months were difficult. Money remained limited, living conditions were cramped, and success was far from guaranteed. But the commitment was absolute. Hours of daily rehearsals forged an extraordinary musical chemistry. Every member learned to anticipate the others. Songs evolved organically through experimentation and persistence. During this period, Gregg emerged as a songwriter. Drawing upon personal pain, loneliness, and childhood trauma, he created compositions that resonated deeply with listeners. One of the most important was Whipping Post. Dark, emotional, and haunting, the song transformed private suffering into universal expression. Another masterpiece, Midnight Rider, captured themes of freedom, restlessness, and survival. These songs established Gregg as more than a singer. He had become a storyteller. Yet even as success approached, self-destructive tendencies remained. During the Vietnam era, facing the possibility of military service, Gregg resorted to an extreme act. Determined to avoid the draft, he shot himself in the foot after studying where to place the bullet to minimize permanent damage. The incident revealed the lengths he would go to protect the musical path he had chosen.